If you're watching this, chances are you're considering publishing your book through Ingramspark. And this is one of the really big companies that a lot of self-published authors use. It's not actually a bookseller itself. It's something called an aggregator that will distribute your book to other book retailers who will then sell your book for you, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. There's actually a lot of places, and Ingramspark does sell books to places around the world. So in this video, I thought I would share with you the pros and cons, because there are 4 really, really big pros, but also 4 really, really big cons to using this company. And then I also will share a tutorial, because I realized it's been years since I've done a tutorial and it's completely out of date at this point. So I'll show you the new dashboard, give you a little tour, and tell you some of the things you need to know when you're uploading your book. And I will include some warnings at the end so that you don't go in blind and run into some problems that I discovered the hard way. So let's get into all of it. First, the pros and cons. So we'll start with the pros. Number 1, you can publish ebook, paperback, and most importantly, hardcover books with dust jackets. While ebooks and paperbacks are honestly pretty easy to publish on many different companies, hardcovers have in the past been really tricky to do, especially if they have a dust jacket. Although I will say there's more and more competition coming up, like Barnes & Noble Press, I believe Lulu maybe, and maybe Book Vault. I think is Draft to Digital getting in that space? I'm not sure. KDP did add hardcovers, but they don't include dust jackets yet. So there's a lot more competition coming up, but I will say that a lot of authors still go to Ingramspark for their hardcovers just because they've kind of been the long-term go-to company for this particular thing. Oh, 48 Hour Books, I just worked with them for like a special edition type of hardcover. They were twice as expensive for printing. The second pro is that both booksellers and librarians typically purchase through Ingramspark. This does not mean that they will buy your book. It just means that they have the option to, versus I have been told by both booksellers like Barnes & Noble and librarians that they are not allowed to purchase through Amazon, or they don't want to if it's competition like Barnes & Noble. So if they're not purchasing through Amazon and your book is only there, that would kind of limit your options, versus if you're on Ingramspark, your options are a lot more open. Again, not guaranteed to actually sell to these people, but at least it's an option. The third pro is their distribution, just meaning like how much access do they have to booksellers and readers alike. They have a really good foundation in the US, but they also have a lot of companies that they work with and can sell your books to, I guess, overseas as well. So it's a really good way to reach international readers. And then number 4, last but not least, the main reason that I personally use this company, despite a lot of reservations on my part, is because they allow print pre-orders. I'm trying to be really specific here. Print means like paperback and hardcover, because honestly, when it comes to ebook pre-orders, that's really easy to do. You can go to so many companies, KDP, Draft to Digital, Apple, Kobo, Barnes & Noble Press, Google Play. But when it comes to print pre-orders, it's always been a little bit more limited for us indie authors again. And I think that is also changing. But at this point in time, if you work with KDP, for example, that's a company owned by Amazon, they don't offer print pre-orders yet. So here's hoping that changes soon. But at this point, if you wanted to have a pre-order up on Amazon, you actually would have to go through a company like Ingramspark, who would distribute that pre-order to Amazon, because Amazon themselves do not offer it, if that makes sense. So those are the 4 pros to working with Ingramspark, but now let's talk about the 4 cons, because the first con is that their customer service is an absolute nightmare. If you search my name here on YouTube plus Ingramspark, I have a lot of videos where I've discussed this, so I won't go super in depth today, but I have a lot of real life examples of just being really frustrated with the way that I've been treated, and I have a lot of proof to back that up. And so it can be small things like dealing with misprints, it could be them actually publishing the wrong files of the book, it can be shipping issues, like there's so many things that I have dealt with. And when it comes to their customer service, they don't even have a phone number anymore. They've removed it so that at this point you have to email and then just hope that there isn't a massive queue and you're getting lost in the shuffle. And if you have like an urgent problem going on, you're kind of out of luck, honestly. The second con is that they require authors to set a wholesale discount on our books, which massively affects how much we are actually getting paid versus how much they keep per book. And I will be showing you when we do the uploading process exactly what I'm talking about here. So we'll get into that later. Number 3, they do actually require some sort of dummy file or placeholder file, whatever you want to call it. When you start the upload process, it looks like they don't anymore. And I was like excited about that when I started the uploading tutorial section of this video. And then I realized, no, you actually cannot complete the uploading process unless you have some kind of files uploaded for both the cover and the interior. And you might be like, that's fine, what's the big deal? Well, if your book is not finished yet, which by the way is very common in traditional publishing and indie publishing, then you will have to upload something that's not finished, and there is a chance that they will publish that book. And you might be like, what are the chances of that happening? Like, that's not a big deal. Well, actually, I have experienced it myself, and I know at least 2 other author friends who have as well. So unfortunately, this is an issue. Number 4, while they did actually remove their initial uploading fee, which awesome, I appreciate that a lot, they actually still have a revision fee for everything after 60 days. So if you don't have your book finished, which again, we've talked about, maybe I wanted to have a 3-month pre-order or a 6-month pre-order, and my book is going to be finished 2 months before release. So I'm uploading it, and then about 4 months later is when I plan to upload the final files. Well, guess what? I'm going to have to pay a revision fee when I upload those final files. And it is $25 for the interior, $25 for the cover. And of course, if you change one, you're going to have to change the other. So it's pretty much $50 every time. So those are the pros and cons. I'll get into a little bit more at the end, just give you a couple more final warnings. But let's jump into the uploading process now and take a look at my screen. And of course, just like any of the other print-on-demand companies, you will have to set up an account really quick. I'm not going to show you mine because it's personal information, obviously, like tax and home address and all that good stuff. But it's fairly straightforward. Just follow the prompts, and then once you're finished, it'll bring you to this home page where you can then go to the left side drop down and click the title option to get started on uploading your book. This page is where you're going to see all the books that you've uploaded. So I actually had an incomplete version, and instead of having to pay for revisions, I just started a fresh version because I don't believe that authors should have to pay for their books. But anyway, I have a lot of my books uploaded on this platform, and I thought I'd show you how to upload really briefly. Typically, you would click on the uploaded title and pick which option you want, and I personally do print book only, again, because I do ebooks on other platforms such as Draft to Digital, mainly because the royalties for ebooks on Ingram are not very good compared to other places. For print books, the reason I do use Ingramspark is mainly, again, for those international sales and also for hardcovers. Like this is a hardcover book right here. So that's all titles right here. You could also click Add Title on the left side to start this process. I would click Print Book Only. So at this point, I can actually say, no, I want to enter my title information right now, but submit my files later, and I can move on. After that, personally, you could just print a book, but I would say most people are here to actually distribute and sell their books. So you would click that option and click Continue. This top bar is going to show you all the sections that you have to fill out. So what I'm going to do is have fun filling this out for a future book where I don't actually have a title yet. This is not the real title, it's just the work in progress, but we're going to call it the Butter Book. It is in English, but of course you could use the drop down to pick a different language if that's the case for you. Another change that I love is that Ingramspark does provide free ISBNs now, and I absolutely take advantage of that. I have a whole other video about ISBNs. You can check it out. I will link it below. When it comes to the publishing rights, if you are an indie author, you will most likely be clicking this option, and they will double check and have you read through this and make sure, okay, no, you're not using someone else's information, you're not pirating a book, and I'll say, no, we are good to go. If you have any questions about whether your book was a public domain work, you could definitely do the click here and learn more option. And then I also have noticed that they recently added the AI question where they're like, hey, are you using AI? Just so you know, right now they're not really doing anything with this that I have noticed, but I have seen a lot of the print-on-demand companies asking this question, and I think they just want to differentiate that as well. You could click to add a few more fun details about your book, like if you had a subtitle, if it's in a series, what's the name, what number book is this in the series? Now, I don't have a name, but let's pretend that the Butter Book series is the name and this is book 1. I would do something like that. These 2 questions at the bottom about editions mean, has this book been published before in the past? And so the Butter Book has never been published before, so I would leave this blank. But if you have published before and maybe it's a different name for the book, for example, you could put that here and then put that as a second or third edition or whatever it might be. Under the authors and contributors section, this is typically going to be you, and you would put in either your real name or your pen name, depending on what you choose to do. You can also kind of go into this if you like. I personally don't bother, but you could put in your biography if you'd like to do that. If you had a co-author, you would add them here by clicking this button. I'm going to get rid of that. And then imprint is actually basically the publisher. So this is what the retail sites are going to list as your publisher. I personally use my business, Grace House Press, for that section. Under subject, they say to choose 3 subjects. Now, this is, if you're clicking the button on the side, picture this like if you walked into a bookstore, what shelf would it be on? Because it's very important to not list your, YA fantasy over in cooking by accident. Readers aren't going to be looking there. So same thing with online. If they're not looking for your book, if they're not even in your section, they're not going to find you, and your target readers are going to miss out on your books. It's really important to kind of browse through these, try to get a feel for, okay, what would fit my book the best. I wonder if I searched Fae, if it might find something. Fairy tale, and folklore. Okay, I believe on Ingramspark this actually refers to middle grade, so I need to uncheck that box, cancel that, and I need to go into young adult. That is actually the category that I personally write in. So let's try this again. I could do coming of age, for example, and sometimes when you click the drop down, there's nothing there, but other times when you click the drop down, there might be a bunch of different options. Let's go ahead and do fairy tales and folklore. I'm thinking also we could do some kind of fantasy. I might actually go online onto a vendor and see what types of books fall under this category. I might look for Fae books because that's what mine is going to be, and be like, oh, okay, they fall under fantasy general, or they fall under fantasy romance. I think that would count. Maybe dark fantasy. So I will add those, and I have 3 categories here, which it said for best results, choose 3. The next category is your audience, and again, mine is young adult, and unfortunately, it looks like these are required now. In the past, I was always told not to fill these in if you could help it, but unfortunately, kind of looks like it has to be. So I'm just going to choose the same age range as my audience. And that's because my books don't have spice, they don't have swearing, they don't go too intense, hopefully. That's just my preference. But if yours did, you could put a higher age range for sure, or you could say it's adult, etc. For the description, this is your book blurb. For the sake of this video, I'm going to use the Stolen Kingdom blurb because I don't have a blurb for the Butter book right now. So we're just going to go ahead and copy paste that in, and then you'll notice that it's a little bit weird on the spacing, so you can just go ahead and play with that, play with the bold and italic and underline. If you wanted to add bullet points, that's probably something you might do for a nonfiction book, etc. And you're going to see that it has a minimum and a maximum here. The next section is keywords. Definitely read up on what keywords are, but what I like to think of is these are what your readers are typing into, say, the Amazon search bar, for example. What would a reader be typing in if they're looking for a book like my Butter book, as I'm calling it? Maybe Fae romance, maybe no spice Fae books, for example. I don't want to keep guessing in this category when I haven't actually done my research yet, but I think I'm supposed to separate with semicolons like this, but you would want to fill this out a lot. And what these are long tail keywords when they have more than one word. That's actually preferable. You don't want to go super long, but the more specific they are, as long as readers are actually searching them, the more likely you'll find your target readers that way. You could click the show more, and you could add a short description if you want to. This just means essentially a kind of a hook. Then we'll click continue. Most of my books have been 5x8 lately. That's just kind of what my genre has been. In some cases, I might add bleed, and so I might go to something a little more specific, like, say, this one. But you're going to want to do your research on what's common in your genre, what you personally want to do, and of course, you're going to need to communicate that with your cover designer and or your formatter to make sure that you're all on the same page, because this is the size of your book and how it will print. You have the option to add color if that happens to be, like if you're doing a children's book or something like that. Typically, though, you're going to do black and white, and you'll find that there are 4 different types of paper. I have been doing cream lately because that's more genre standard in young adult, but honestly, I've done white in the past too. It's not a big deal, but the reason that you need to make this decision and stick to it is because it actually will change the spine slightly if you do cream versus white. And so you're going to want to communicate this to your cover designer and then stick to it. In this case, I think I'll probably be starting out with a paperback, but I love that I could do a hardback as well. And there's only one option for paperback. If you were to do a hardcover, you can see that there's case laminate, but there's also a few other options like a case laminate with a dust jacket right here. We're going to go ahead and stick with paperback though. The last part of this section is whether you want a gloss cover or a matte cover. And again, kind of focus on what your genre typically will have. Mine is typically going to have matte covers. It's going to list out all your decisions right here. So this is something you could send to your cover designer, and then you can decide, well, do I want to enable this duplex option? It means that you're able to print on the inside cover of your book. This is a cool new feature that I've actually never tried through Ingramspark. However, I will say that there's obviously an upcharge in the printing. It's going to make it quite a bit more expensive. Just keep that in mind. I have never done this, so I'm going to click no, and let's just say that my page count was 300 pages. I don't actually have the final page count, so I have no idea, but that's kind of an average book right now. And then it will tell you, okay, here's going to be your print cost in the US. If you were somewhere else, you could also change this. Then you'll move on to print pricing. And so this is unfortunately where things get a little dicey. In the United States, a typical YA fantasy 300-page book right now might be $15. Let's say $14.99. Okay. And unfortunately, Ingramspark is going to require that you have a discount, what's called a wholesale discount. So let me click on this so you could read it really quick. They also have a video. One thing that you should know that bothers me a lot is that this wholesale discount is really meant for booksellers. When booksellers like maybe Barnes & Noble, for example, want to come and buy your book, awesome. You want to give them a discount because you want them to be excited about buying your book. And so say for Barnes & Noble, you give them 55%. Awesome. But you'll notice that my compensation went from $9 to $1.12. And on top of that, typically when you work with booksellers, you have to allow them to have a return option, whether deliver or destroy. So I typically will do this, but that is a really miserable compensation for authors. That's terrible. So instead, I'll click the other option and do the lowest that they'll let me do, which is 40%. You'll notice that my compensation is now $3.36, which is better than $1, but not nearly as great as it could have been. This is where I want to pause really quick and point something out that I think many authors don't even realize. This wholesale discount is for booksellers and maybe librarians, people who have access to it, right? However, does your average reader who's purchasing the book on Amazon get this wholesale discount? No. Or if they purchase it on Target or Barnes & Noble? No. If a single individual reader is buying your book, they are not receiving this wholesale discount, but you are still providing it because you are forced to provide it as an author. So this is something I think there needs to be a lot more discussion on. I think Ingramspark needs to start getting much more open about this because they are pocketing that wholesale discount. And on top of that, there have been articles out that say that when they're on the bookseller side, for example, someone who actually did work with Barnes & Noble and wanted to purchase the book through Barnes & Noble, that they actually were not getting a 40% discount in the store themselves. They were getting a 10% or a 15% or whatever it might be. And that Ingramspark was actually still pocketing a very large chunk of this wholesale discount. And that was when it was a 55% discount. So if you imagine me putting it at 40%, they might only be getting a 5% discount for all that we know as authors. This is really frustrating as an author, and I just think that you need to be aware of this before you go into working with a company like this. And unfortunately, when you're outside the US, you still have to have a minimum of a 35% discount for all of these other places as well. I think the last one right here is 30%. So you can see your compensation drop quite a bit. You also have to click some of these options, which reminds me that I need to go up to the top, and I do not actually have a return option for these other countries because the return costs are astronomical. Right here, publishers are charged the current wholesale cost of the title plus shipping and handling, $2 per book for the US and $20 per book for US returns to an international address. So you can imagine how incredibly expensive it would be to have the return option on the overseas over here. And there's another box for me to click now. But that is something you can pause to read these if you're interested. Unfortunately, I don't have the option to skip the wholesale discount anymore, and so that really affects my compensation as an author. These last options right here, enabling the look inside the book feature, is really fun, but don't do this unless you've uploaded your final file. You can come back to this, I believe, but I'm not going to click yes now, because then people could read, you know, a dummy file if I had one. The large text edition, you can read up on that if you want to click and know more, but that's if you actually had large text for people who wanted that. And then right to left content is pretty rare in the US, but you might have that, for example. And so you could definitely click that option as well. And then you get to choose your release date. I have no idea when the Butter book is going to come out. Let's just say, how cool would it be if it came out sometime in November? Who knows? And then I'm just going to mention that I would leave this on sale date empty, because that's typically, I believe, when booksellers and readers can actually start buying it. So you do not want them to start buying it early. So I would leave that box alone. Let's move on to the next page, which is the uploading section. This is where you would upload your files. Now, I don't have any files. Even though in the beginning I said that I did not have my files ready yet, you can see that they're not actually going to let me move on until I do have files. So really, they don't let authors upload a book and set up the publication unless you have some sort of dummy file set up. If you feel comfortable doing that, you could upload something. I would encourage you, if you're uploading interior pages, to have something in the beginning, just in case they actually did start printing, that lets your reader know, hey, this is not the final copy. This is just a placeholder book. And then hopefully for the print cover, maybe you're able to work with a cover designer who gives you something temporary that you could use early on, and they're willing to do that. And then you can change that down the road. But this right here is one reason that it's very frustrating that you have to pay revision fees later on down the road with Ingramspark, because after 60 days, say I set up a pre-order with some dummy files and my pre-order window is 3 months long or 4 months long or even 5 or 6 months long. That's not very long in the grand scheme of things. However, I would still have to pay a revision fee for both of these, and I believe it's $25 each. So that would be very expensive. Just keep that in mind. And since I can't press continue, I'm just going to point out that the validation, confirmation, and complete sections are very straightforward. Validation is where they're just going to let you know if there are any errors in your uploads. In the confirmation, you're going to say, yes, I'm good to go, and you're going to pay, and then you're going to complete the entire process, and your book will be uploaded. I'm not going to move forward with that because I don't actually want to publish some sort of dummy file for the sake of this video, but this will hopefully give you a feel for how Ingramspark has updated since the last time that I published a book through them and shared that with you guys. Okay, what I should have said during the end of that screen recording was that when you finish this uploading process, you're actually submitting your book to Ingramspark for review, not submitting it to retailers to go on sale, because there's actually still a few steps you have to go through before that will happen. Big picture, Ingramspark has to review your files first, then they're going to bounce them back to you for you to review again, possibly if there are errors, or just to approve and say, yes, you're good to go, and then potentially order a proof copy. Finally, when you approve it, it'll bounce back to Ingramspark the second time, and that's when they'll start sending out your information to retailers, and it'll take a while, but it'll eventually get uploaded to all of the different retail sites for pre-order or for release. Oh, okay. I'm just Googling it now, but I thought it was 3 business days that Ingramspark needed to review, but now I'm reading that it says 5 to 7 business days for them to review your book after you uploaded it and you finished that process that we just went through. I mean, that does make sense though. That sounds right to me. Anyway, coming back to the point, they say business days. I know that for a fact. And so that means do not count the weekends when you're like looking at a calendar trying to figure out when they might be done. Do not count holidays, and do not count the day that you submit it, because most likely they won't count that day either. I believe it's like after, I don't know, I can't remember if it's 2 p.m. or what it was. Don't quote me on that. But after a certain point in the day, they don't count that as one of the business days either. Okay, so let's say it took them roughly a week, maybe a little bit more, and they finished their review process, and now they're gonna bounce the book back to you. Either they're gonna say they found an error, you have to address it, kind of start the whole process over again, or they might say, okay, you're good to go. Here is an e-proof copy for you to approve. So that's gonna look like something you can either click on it in your email, or you can go to your account and find it that way, and you're gonna review this e-proof copy. And I really, really, really recommend you take a very close look at it, scroll through every page, make sure there's nothing weird going on. And then you have two options. You could either click approve, it looks good, I'm ready to get this book out there to retailers, or you could order a physical proof copy first. Kind of depends on where you're at in the publishing process. For me, I personally think it's really, really, really important to see a physical proof of your book before it's published, but not necessarily before you set up a pre-order. It really depends on the timeline. So let me just back up and kind of explain. The physical proof, and Ingramspark will say this as well, is really important for you to review because you never know if there's something you just can't see on the digital side of things, like maybe the spine is a little bit crooked, or the color is actually printing really weird, or I don't know, the back cover's crooked. Like, you never know until you actually see a physical book in your hands. However, just a quick side tangent, when you order a print proof copy, it can get a little bit dicey because it takes a really, really long time. So first of all, when you order it, they're gonna tell you that there's a print time and a shipping time. Typically, I have found that for paperbacks, it's somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks, and hardcovers take even longer. And here's my first warning. Even though they do offer faster shipping and printing time, I think as well, I have actually tried it twice. And one time I even ordered a regular copy like the next day, and I got them on the same day. So I have found in my experience that it's not actually any faster at all. So that's a complete waste of money. I would not recommend it personally. Once your proof copy arrives, you're gonna probably wanna actually take time to review it. It could just take you a day if you're just flipping through, looking for anything like minimal. But for me, typically, I actually do my proofread. And so I'm gonna take a full week typically to review that book. And of course, if you find any issues, which is very common actually to find, even if it's just really small and you have something you want to tweak, you actually have to start the whole process over again, upload those new files, go through the submission, have them review it, and then approve the e-proof copy all over again. So this whole process could take anywhere from, say, 2 or 3 weeks to 2 months, honestly, in some cases. So just be aware that towards the end of release, when you're getting ready to actually publish your book, you might need a really good solid 2-month buffer window to complete this process and make sure your book looks good before you press publish. And if you decide to use your proof copy for proofreading also, I have this video, which I'll link below, on how I like to do that. So that's what I would do if I were getting ready to publish. But let's say you're back in the pre-order stage, so all you really need to do at this point is approve that e-proof copy, because it's not actually probably the final files yet anyway, and you just need to make sure the cover looks good and all the information you put in is correct to go ahead and submit your book to retailers to have them start putting it out for pre-order. At this point, when you press approve, you might think, okay, the book's gonna be live on retailers like tomorrow, right? But unfortunately, no. They have said to me in the past, I don't know if this is still the case, but it's typically about 10 business days roughly for your information to get out to all these other retailers like Amazon, Barnes & Noble. So it can still be between when you first submit your book and when you finally see it show up on retailers for pre-order, at least 2 weeks typically. And that's a long time. This means that if you count those, let's see, I thought it was 3 business days. Now apparently it's 5 to 7 business days for Ingramspark to approve. And then you approve the e-proof the next day. And then it takes roughly 10 or more business days to get to the retailers. It's over 2 weeks, probably closer to 3 at least, before you're actually going to see your book on a retailer for pre-order. So just keep that in mind. The reason I bring this up is because a lot of us authors really like to do a fun reveal. Maybe it's a cover reveal along with a pre-order link. And so you're gonna wanna plan really, really far ahead because it's probably gonna take longer than you expect. Once I actually had to reach out to Ingram because I had made some changes and Barnes & Noble hadn't changed for an entire month. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it can take a really long time. In my experience, this does mean that I tend to give myself a bigger buffer range, and then the book might show up sooner, hopefully, before I'm actually ready to reveal it. And you might be like, oh no, then readers are gonna find it. But in my opinion, that's not as big a deal as if you do your big reveal, but you don't have a pre-order link to share with your readers because it's not done yet. Better to have the book out for a while and you know it's there. Most of your readers probably have no idea because typically they're not gonna go and stumble across your book unless you go and tell them about it. Whew, that was a lot of information to cover, so you can see why I've avoided doing an update on this topic for so long, but I really hope it was helpful for you. Give this video a thumbs up if it was. Make sure you subscribe for more content like this, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye!